Another week, another Unlapped, and as you can tell, this is a two-person show because it's another week where Nate has just been like, I'm good, I'm not going to hang out with my friends. Remember, Unlapped is presented by Oracle. Right now, Oracle is offering to cut your current cloud bill in half if you move to OCI. See if your company qualifies at oracle.com/unlapped. That is Laurence. I am Nicole. If you're watching on YouTube, like the channel, subscribe. We are here 365 days a year with all of your F1 content and more. And then if you're listening, hit us up with a 5-star review, just wherever you get your podcasts. And remember, we're here every single week. We actually have a race to talk about this week. It's
about time, right?
kind of like, I realize that we're upon the summer break and we're going to have like a couple of weeks of this again, but I'm really, have you done anything fun? Like, have you enjoyed the time away?
Well, I mean, I can't be too harsh on Nate skipping shows because I managed to skip that Christian Horner one by going on holiday for that week. So I have had a little bit of time away, but it's a strange situation because usually this time of year, everyone in Formula One is just like, okay, it's only 2 more races to go. Then we got the summer break. Not to say that people in F1 don't like going racing. Of course they do. That's their life. But there's still that desire to get to that break, to have those weeks off, spend some time with the family, hopefully make the most of some good weather in Europe. But already we've had like a mini break. So it actually feels quite good. I think everyone's going to be a little bit more refreshed going into this double header, Belgium and Budapest, 2 really good races for quite different reasons. So I think there's going to be good energy this weekend.
Look, like the schedule is a grind. It's 24 races. It's around the world. Some of those weeks are back to back. There are travel logistics. Like anyone who travels for a living knows this is a grind. This is difficult. So it's not going to stop me from giving Nate grief constantly because that's what we do. But let's go for it. You did have the week off when the Christian Horner news broke. This is really the first time that we will see Red Bull in this sort of new era. You've got Mekies now as the team principal, and we've thought about it, we've talked a little bit about it, but now in theory, we get to see this new era of Red Bull. How do you think it will actually appear to those of us at home?
I think it's going to be fascinating because even though there's this huge race team and all the development plans for that car are all in place, and in a way, how they turned up in Belgium, it doesn't matter who the team principal was because that's how the car's going to turn up and it's how it's going to race. And of course, Max Verstappen is probably going to do something remarkable in it. Still, not to have that personality at the head of it, Christian Horner, who has been there since the very first day Red Bull turned a wheel in Formula One, is huge. And it's just going to be something missing there. And I imagine Laurent Mekies, kind of knowing the person that he is and the impression that he's made on Formula One already, he's not the kind of person who's going to come in and try and stamp his own personality on it. I think actually he's probably going to do the sensible thing, which is observe, figure out what's going on, really learn about the team. Of course, he's had some contact with it through being the Racing Bulls team principal, but it is moving to a new team all the same. And really just figure out where the weak points are, what needs to change, if anything. And you can't judge. It's not, it's not like a soccer team where a new manager comes in and there can be a big bounce the following game. F1 isn't like that. You need to really understand it all and make some changes. But what's going to be really interesting for me is how much presence there is from Red Bull Austria, the parent company, the giant fizzy drinks company, and particularly Oliver Mintzlaff, who was the person who he made the decision on Horner and of course was in the communication about Horner leaving the team. So will he face the media? Will he talk to people? Will he get this message across from Red Bull about what the future of this team is? What's going to be left? Horner was such a big part of it. What happens now? Is it going to be a complete revolution? That is all really interesting. And I don't know the answer yet, but it's certainly going to be a different feeling.
I think that's the thing that we've sort of been talking about and thinking about, and because this isn't like a football team or a soccer team where there can be an immediate change when a new manager comes in. The ball is already rolling downhill for what we're going to see in 2026 and maybe even 2027. So there's this idea that Mekies could potentially just be the temporary fix, the stopgap until they figure out what's happening next, or he's the guy, but he has to prove himself over the next few weeks/months, and we don't know what that bar is. We don't know what it's going to be for like Red Bull to look at it, the parent company, the fizzy drinks people to sit back and be like, yes, this is a success under Mekies, so we can continue on. Do you have any idea what that may be? Because, I mean, in theory, it would seem to me that it's a matter of keeping Max in the building. And if he can't do that, then maybe, nope, we're moving on. We're finding an entirely new direction, and Red Bull looks entirely different in 2026.
Yeah, I think the Max question is key, of course, going into this weekend, but especially next year. But I don't think anyone at Red Bull or on the Max side is really thinking that Mekies is going to be the difference on that. He may be able to, convince Max that things are actually going to go in the right direction and so on. But I think that's much more going to come from how much money is on the table for Max. How good is that engine project for next year? And that's stuff that Mekies just cannot influence in the short amount of time that he's going to have before Max makes his decision. So I think that's almost out of his control. And I think ultimately what we'll see at Red Bull is Mekies being one of those new style of team principals that we've seen elsewhere on the grid, where their responsibility is really for the pure racing operation. So, your Ayo Komatsu, who was originally an engineer, took over Gunther Steiner, was nowhere near the personality that Steiner was, but has actually done a really good job of making the race team work. Another great example, James Vowles at Williams. Obviously, he went from Mercedes to Williams, but again, coming from an engineering background like Laurent Mekies has done as well, and then just going into a senior position where you can, really figure out what a team needs from an engineering perspective. I'd say probably Komatsu and Vowles, maybe I'm doing them a bit of disservice. They do have that wider team principal role as well, but then maybe an Andrea Stella at McLaren. He has Zach Brown making the big CEO political decisions, but he's just focused on getting the right things in the right place to make the car go fast. And then Jonathan Wheatley's another example who's gone from Red Bull to Sauber, but is sitting under Mattia Bonotto, who's the overall CEO. So that's what I would expect from Mekies going forward. But there's so many unanswered questions. And the fact that he's gone in there with a CEO title as well kind of makes it hard to pick out exactly what's going on. But this is what this weekend, a lot of the early part of this Belgian Grand Prix weekend is going to be about, us figuring out what it all means, trying to get a gauge from Max Verstappen about whether he's happy about it. I imagine he's probably slightly happier than he was before, but getting a gauge from Max, whether this will be a big change that actually influences his decision on his career going forward. That's going to be fascinating. But until we get Nate on the ground there, I'm not going to then we're struggling to answer those questions right now.
Bottom line, it's a new look, it's a new era at Red Bull. It's just a matter of how much newness we get injected into it over the next, handful of months slash year, if we're being honest. Belgium is a place where that team has been great. Actually, you can boil it down to two drivers. This has sort of been the Max Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton show, because between the two of them, they have won the last 5 races there. Do you have any reason to believe that this is going to be something different? It's going to be something new? Because obviously McLaren has been the team to beat this year. So what are the chances that it is not the Verstappen Hamilton show this weekend?
Yeah, I think McLaren's ability to perform on all types of circuit this season will mean that they'll be the team to beat going into it. But because it is one of those circuits where the driver does seem to make a bit of a difference, Max does have this amazing record there, as does Lewis to some extent. But just this ability to take on some of those corners like Pujon, that really high speed left-hander downhill, make sure that it's flat in qualifying, also find that gap between the setup of making the car work on the straights, making it work in the corners. All of those things go into making a car particularly good in Spa. And it can mean that we get a slightly, bit of a shock result, a surprise result. So McLaren absolutely the team to beat going in there. I'd be very surprised if Max or Lewis continued that record going forward and they beat one of the McLaren drivers. But you never know. It is Spa. Strange things happen. And not least the weather in Spa is incredibly unpredictable.
Well, it's a very cool track too. There's a lot of elevation changes. How do you describe it?
One of the best.
Sometimes those are the things that don't show up on TV. The
No, that's
elevation
true.
changes, it always looks a little flatter. It always looks, like less dimensional. So like, what am I missing not being there?
Yeah, I mean, Eau Rouge, which is the famous corner up to Ramble on,
Yes.
that is a sensational piece of racetrack. And really, it is the kind of piece of racetrack where I'd say you have to go there to see it. I remember the first time I saw it when I was relatively young. I guess it was around 2005 time, and just seeing cars go up that vertical. It's
Yeah.
remarkable. And I've since actually been lucky enough to do some track runs around there. And that's right at the start of your lap. So you're doing a 7 kilometer, I guess about 5 mile run. And you've got that right at the start of your run. But it is intensely steep. And unlike anywhere else in Formula One, and that's what makes this track special, is that it is incredibly old school in that, you know, it's been like that for an incredibly long time. I mean, it dates back to the older circuit, which was much longer, but even the current layout is well established in Formula One, but it has just features that nowhere else that Formula One races has, and that's why it's so special to go and see racing there. Actually, I feel like sometimes we don't always get the best racing. We kind of, it's like one of these tracks a bit like Suzuka where we bill it up and then it slightly lets us down, but yeah, it's still such a special place to see Formula One cars.
You're doing your track runs wrong. You should go the opposite
Yeah,
way so that you
that's a good
end
shout,
up
actually.
going down the hill, not starting up the hill. Come on, like you have to work smarter, not harder. Remember last year, this is the race that had the weird result because it was actually George Russell who won it, but it was taken away. The
Correct.
car was too light. So, which sort of leads me to the tire question because basically the difference in his weight was the fact that he didn't pick up the marbles and things like that. So how much do tires come into play here? He had that interesting strategy. It was the one stopper. Everyone else stopped twice. Yes. Yeah. So how could they play a
Yeah.
role this time?
Yeah, I mean that's absolutely right. And actually, Pirelli have really tried to ensure that a two-stop strategy is still possible because they put a gap between the compounds. So usually we'd have 3 compounds in a row. So say C1, C2, C3.
Yep.
Now for this weekend, they've gone C1, C3, C4. So the usual gap between what will be the hard compound and the medium compound is even bigger. So there's a bigger performance gap, but also a bigger durability gap. So in the race, you might be inclined to try a one stop if you're slightly out of position and you just want to do something different. But they're trying to make sure that a two-stop strategy is still viable with that. So I think you know that's a positive thing. It's Pirelli. We've seen a number of times this season when racing's been good. It's because there's been multiple strategy options on the table, and they've tried really hard to make sure that's the case again. And then it's just the sheer forces going through the tires at this circuit. You know, we talked about Eau Rouge, the compression. That's a weird thing that a Formula One car doesn't usually experience. That kind of G as it gets pushed into the circuit and up, and then gets loose over the top. Well, not so much with the downforce they're running, but still kind of the suspension rises back up. And then a corner like Pujon, just the incredible forces going through the tire, the sidewall. These cars are now quite heavy cars. And so, yeah, to have that all going through the sidewall of the tire is a huge amount to ask of it. So you have things like tire failures at Spa, you know, it has happened in the fairly recent past as well. So yeah, there'll be a big discussion on that, a big eye on that, as long as we don't get what happened in Silverstone, which is another wet race and all strategies go out the window.
I kind of like the wet races though. Like let it be
Oh,
chaos, let it be
absolutely.
wild. Let's go. Let's have something weird happen. So I'm going to sort of pose this next question to you because I'm sitting here thinking, and it's like, yes, between the two, Max and Lewis, they won the last 5 races there, although there is the slight asterisk on what happened last year because it was awarded to Lewis afterwards. And then obviously we've talked about McLaren being the team to beat. So take those 4 drivers out of it. You can't say Max, you can't say Lewis, and you can't say either Lando or Oscar. Is there another team, another driver out there that you're like, this could be a weekend in which they surprise us, that they stand out, this track suits them, that sort of thing?
Well, I mean, I'd look to Mercedes again,
I
considering
said you
the.
can't. Oh no, I did. Never mind. You
Yeah,
said
you said
I
Lewis
said
is
yeah. Sorry.
now Ferrari. No, but a serious point as well. One thing that we've known about Mercedes last year and into this year is that the car, when it's cooler,
Yeah.
performs better. It's easier on its tires. It's able to kind of extract that performance for longer, and that could well be the case this weekend in Spa. I mean, I'm in London right now, you know, not too far away, and the temperature's really dipped in this part of Europe the last week or so. So there's a possibility there that Mercedes will be looking at this and, you know, off the back of some promising performances at various times, but usually when the temperatures are low, they'll be looking at it as an opportunity to go in. I mean, otherwise, outside of that, it's a circuit with quite long straights. You know, the power is an important factor in performance. So you kind of think Alpine are probably going to struggle a bit, but Aston Martin, they seem to be making a bit of progress recently in the background. Perhaps this can be a circuit that plays to their strengths.
My
Um,
my conspiracy theory is that it's not going to be a great weekend for Mercedes.
oh,
Because
okay. I like that.
why would George want to be great? Because like think about it. If there's the clause like we think like that there's the performance clause for Max Verstappen, if he's out of the top three come the summer break, he'd have the out with the team. The person that could get him would be George. But then of course all the talk is if Max goes to Mercedes, then he would take George's seat. So no, I'm gonna be like, cool, go. Like you can get past me. I'm not gonna like stick it into the wall. I'm not gonna be crazy, but I'll be like, no, guys, it's not quite there. We're just a little off because he wants to keep his seat. But that's my conspiracy theory. I'm not actually saying that that actually is the case. It's just down the rabbit hole I went. For the two McLaren drivers, which one has the edge this weekend?
So I started the season thinking that any circuit with high-speed corners, Oscar Piastri had a bit of an edge. But ever since they introduced that new front suspension and Lando's had a bit more feel from the car, a little bit more of what he wants, he's been able to match him. I mean, or he's at least been able to get close and sometimes beat him. So it's so hard to say. And I actually asked this to Oscar Piastri ahead of the British Grand Prix. I said, when you go to a circuit, do you think this is a Lando circuit or this is a circuit where he is really going to be able to make the difference? And he said, it's just not like that. We don't know going into race weekends who's going to have the edge. What really matters is that you hit the ground in that first practice session, especially this weekend because it's a sprint race. But even on a normal race weekend, you hit that first practice session with a setup that you're happy with. So a lot of that comes down to the work the team's done in the simulator prior. And if everything is in the right place, you're not chasing details around the car and things aren't changing in one way to open up an issue in another way. That's when they start to build the momentum, and that's when they start to have an edge from the early practice sessions through to the race. And we've seen that a number of times. So, but this weekend, even more important because one practice session, then sprint qualifying, then a sprint race, then qualifying, and then the race. So I think whoever's looking good in that first practice session between those two is likely to carry it through for the rest of the weekend.
You know it. I'm a huge fan of the sprint race weekends. I think there's so much more payoff in terms of like being a viewer or being a fan. The added drama element to it. Plus, I just like the fact that you only have a limited amount of time to figure the car out, and then you have to go. And I love that aspect of it. And I think every weekend should be a sprint race weekend. Teams would hate me, but I like that. It's time for the stat of the week, which of course is brought to you by Oracle. Right now, Oracle is offering to cut your current cloud bill in half if you move to OCI. See if your company qualifies at oracle.com/unlapped. And this is an interesting run because Yuki Tsunoda is one of 18 Japanese drivers in the history of Formula One. And those drivers have now combined to make exactly 500 starts. Yet not a single one of them has ever won a race. So that makes the Japanese drivers the most of any nation without a Formula One win. There are huge changes, obviously, at Red Bull because of the Christian Horner departure. It's not been a tremendous start for Yuki at Red Bull after the change. He went in week 3. He's been in the points twice, but the best he's ever done is ninth. What do you think are the realistic expectations for Yuki now at Red Bull, now that Christian Horner is gone?
I think it hasn't actually changed a huge amount. It's clear that he needs to perform better. On average, I think he's about 0.6 seconds off Max Verstappen in qualifying, and that's simply not enough. I mean, it's slightly better than the small sample of results we had with Liam Lawson at the start of the year when it was over 0.7, but it's not enough. He needs to get that down to at least, I'd say, 0.3 seconds or so towards the end of the year to stand a chance. But I feel like a decision is going to be made earlier than that. There's already headlines doing the rounds that Yuki Tsunoda doesn't have a future at Red Bull. That isn't confirmed as far as I'm aware. It certainly hasn't been officially communicated. But I think he's got to do something fairly dramatic in the next few races just to put himself back in there. Of course, if you put an end to that stat and he gave Japan its first Formula One victory, that would probably do it. But realistically, I think, getting in the shout for the odd podium here and there, but it's hard to see where that's going to happen because, the car just isn't
Mm-mm.
where it should be. It doesn't seem to be getting a huge amount better. And with the change that's happened at Red Bull as well, you feel like it's not the stability that maybe he needs to push himself up. But hey, it's now or never. He's got to do something.
He's got to do something, but also you never know. Like we talked about just the weird conditions at Silverstone. Like you never know what's going to happen in terms of weather along the way. If there is a weird race weekend where there's some weird strategy or something happens, you do get the occasional race where somebody ends up on the podium. I don't want to take anything away from Nico Hulkenberg, but there was a reason why he had never had a podium and then he ended up on the podium a few weeks ago. So there's always the opportunity for that to happen. Like it's sort of like the any given Sunday perspective. It's like this is why they actually race, because any given Sunday anything could happen. I always root for the chaos. So I totally agree with you. It doesn't make sense, I think, in the long run to have him in the car beyond this year. It's not that I don't want to see it happen, but there's the Honda ties, those are going away. The performance just hasn't been there. And one thing that we've talked about a lot in the last couple of weeks is sort of the idea of the pipeline at Red Bull. They went from Sebastian Vettel, they won the championships there, and then it turned into the Max Verstappen show. There was always sort of like someone waiting in the wings, and even when there was like the lean year, but it was like, okay, but Max is the greatest thing. Max is coming. Max was winning races. Max is going to win the championship, and then he did, and then he's rattled off four. Now it looks like there isn't anything really coming. There really isn't anything waiting in the rings, which to me is part of the reason why they made the changes they made. And so it just doesn't make sense to keep Yuki. Um,
The only thing I'd counter that with is that I don't think what's happening to Yuki in the Red Bull right now is actually a Yuki problem. It's
oh
a
no,
Red
I do agree with that.
because we've seen that for so many teammates of Max,
Yes.
how difficult it is to live on his level. So I'm inclined to think that you do keep Yuki. If it was me making the decision, I don't think this is what will happen, but I do think if I was making a decision, I'd want to keep Yuki just to have that bit of consistency and also to see whether next year, if they have a car that is more suitable to both drivers, of course, complete regulation reset, you'll have a better benchmark. Whereas if you put Hadjar in there, you won't really know. You're thinking, well, is it
Yeah.
Hadjar that's made the difference, or is it that we've actually got a car that's better balanced? Or if Hadjar's miles off, you're like, well, is it because he's still too young? Have we burnt through another driver? And that's my other question: is like, who do you put in instead of Yuki? You got Isaac Hadjar, Liam Lawson, Arvid Lindblad, or somebody else, bring in somebody else from the driver market. But yeah, I just look at it and I think I'm not sure, getting rid of Yuki is the answer at all to Red Bull's problems at this stage. But I guess with Lindblad coming up, that's the question of who makes the space, because it does look increasingly like Lindblad will be making a step to F1 next year, probably with Racing Bulls. But yeah, then who kind of moves out of the position. And then, of course, they have the question around Max. I mean, I don't think they're going to make any decision until they know for certain they've got Max Verstappen in the car next year.
All I know is two things. One, we're trying to assign logic to a situation that hasn't always used logic. And I forget what my second thing was because that's how my brain works. Squirrel, squirrel.
I mean, the first point is absolutely right. I mean, you just leave it there because
Right.
Jake and Red Bull's driving decisions have not gone together hand in hand for some time
No.
now.
So Nate is not with us today because he really likes to blow us off, but he is working. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. He's going to spa this weekend. You get to stay home, but he did have the opportunity to chat with F2 driver Jak Crawford. And that's a really interesting name right now because he is in the conversation for a role with the new Cadillac team, whether that be, the racing seat or a reserve driver. He's also, up in the points right now when it comes to F2. And all of those things could potentially play into like what Cadillac does or doesn't do. So Nate did have to get to have that conversation with Jak this week. And we actually have it for you now. So let's take a listen.
Thank you, Nicole. Yeah, we've got a guest on the show. We've been promising you guys guests for quite a while, and we thought we'd start this year with an American guest because after all, we're ESPN, that's what we do. We've got Jak Crawford, Formula 2 driver, Aston Martin development driver with us. Jak, thanks so much for coming on the show, mate. How are you doing?
Yeah, very well, thanks. Yeah, excited to get back racing. So
Yeah.
Yeah, doing good.
You've had the 2 weeks off. What have you been up to? I mean, for you racing guys, like you just eat, sleep, racing all the time. What do you do when there's a lull in the calendar?
Yeah, there actually hasn't been much of a break. I went straight away to Berlin for the Formula E race that was happening there,
Mhm.
doing reserve driver role for Andretti there in Formula E, and then as well participating in the rookie test they do on the Monday after the race.
And it's kind of, I mean, you're jumping between a lot of different race cars, a lot of different series there. Like, I'm sure for a lot of you guys, you guys can pretty much jump in anything and race it pretty fast. But there must be a lot of kind of machinations behind doing that. Mentally, kind of you're going from Formula E, you're then prepping maybe for an F1 reserve. You've obviously got the Formula 2 stuff to do as well. How do you find moving back and forth between all of that?
Yeah, I found it a little bit tricky when I first started doing it last year when let's say t testing a Formula E or Formula One car and then going back to the Formula Two car. I found it a bit tricky, my first few laps back in the F2 car. But now I'm so used to it now that I've kind of just adapted myself and I've done so many days in the simulator that I feel like I'm just able to adapt super quick, and I actually feel like it's something that helps me a little bit, just being able to try all these different things, be able to, have these new experiences, and then going back in my F2 car and being, same as always.
You're second currently in F2, very, very close to leading the championship. We actually met, didn't we, briefly in Spain? And I think you
Yeah.
had probably one of the unluckiest races I've ever seen after that. I think it was literally hours later. You were leading, I think, and the safety car came out and basically just ruined your race. And I was sat there and I messaged Struan, who was our mutual contact. I guess he's your agent, isn't he? And
Yeah.
I was just like, I can't believe how unlucky that is. But it was great to see you winning last time out. That must have been a good feeling. I know you've not got the lead of the championship yet, but you're right there in the hunt midway through.
Yeah, it's great to be in contention at this stage. We just passed halfway, so it's just about the perfect time. And, it's when things start to settle out now. You see who the favorites are in the championship. And, it was a tough start to the season, had a lot of good results since kind of round three in Jeddah. And, from then on, it's been uphill, and I've been climbing up the championship basically position every weekend, now up to second. So yeah, it's looking pretty good for the rest of the season and just hoping to keep up the work that we've been doing.
Yeah, no, and I've got to say, Formula Two, when those races are on, from my perspective in the media, that's actually when I spend a lot of my time in the paddock, kind of chasing stories. So I don't always get to see a huge amount of what's going on. I've been trying to, especially since we met, and obviously as ESPN, I'm like I've got to follow the Americans what they're doing, despite the accent. I feel like I've got to be doing that. But what I find so interesting about it is, last year we saw with Kimi Antonelli and Ollie Behrman especially, it was really difficult to kind of judge their performances because they were kind of on the cusp of Formula One, sorry. But then in F2, it was kind of up and down, really, really up and down. Yours has been much more linear and much more noticeable. Did you learn anything from those guys?
Yeah, in terms of my approach, compared to last year, last year I was, with the same team, I was already,
Yeah.
quite some good results, finishing fifth in the championship, and what was, I thought, a very, very competitive season. Obviously, lots of guys going up to F1 from F2 last year. Yeah, it was a very competitive season, but I just feel like I lacked a bit of consistency through the season compared to the guys that were fighting for the title in the last race. And yeah, just been able to put that together. I honestly I can't pinpoint why.
Yeah.
I would say it's more down to experience and having been through so many different things.
You mentioned the Andretti link with FE, and I wanted obviously to bring in Cadillac. How does an American find living in Milton Keynes, the famous or infamous American designed city, as it were, in Britain? A lot of English people have some quite choice things to say about it. How have you found it? Is it anything like home, or is it just an awful cheap imitation?
Yeah, it's definitely not like home. Definitely not like home. It's interesting though, I moved here, back when I was with Red Bull. I moved here when I was into this apartment when I was 17, and I've lived here for, 3 years now. And it's all right, it's actually a very, very convenient place to live just because, I'm near all these Formula One teams. It's kind of like the Motorsport Valley, isn't it? So
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
super. It's a good place to be, even though, for the location isn't the best.
Yeah. No, I'm sure it's all right. And you mentioned Red Bull there. That was kind of your kind of step into kind of this Formula One orbit in 2020. Really tough time to join a junior academy right there in COVID. You were there till the end of 2023. Obviously, it's probably the most famous driver academy just in terms of what it's produced, just in terms of how often it's in the news cycle. What was that like being in the Red Bull program? And we hear all the time about the infamous calls from Helmut Marko. Did you have many of those where he's like, if this guy doesn't pick up on ring 2 or 3, I'm hanging up on him straight away? I've heard a few bad stories about that maybe get blown out of proportion a little bit.
Yeah, I've had some phone calls from Mr. Marco.
Do you have to call him Dr. Marco or can you call him Helmet? How does that work?
Dr. Marco, I guess,
Yeah.
as you call
Okay.
him.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know when it's gonna come. You know when it's
Right.
gonna come. You do a bad race. I remember having a bad start in a race, and I was expecting it the next morning at 7:30 in the morning. Was at the airport and got a call.
Yeah.
Um, I never missed a call from him, surprisingly. So
Oh,
maybe
that's
he
good.
knows what I'm doing and where I'm at. But
Yeah.
no, he just yeah, you expect it for sure. And yeah, there was definitely a bit of pressure added to it. It was very results driven. There was almost an expectation before the start of the season, and if you didn't meet those expectations, then it was a bit of a letdown. Going into my F3 year, straight from F4 to F3 was win the championship, and then next year was after that win the championship. So it was always just this, high expectation to be held.
Yeah. And I suppose, I mean, because that's the famous one, obviously, is, the pressure associated with Red Bull. But once you left that, you obviously stayed in the F1 orbit. I guess the pressure, I mean, maybe the pressure does feel as high elsewhere, but I imagine by that point, once you've kind of been through one system and onto another team, a lot of that pressure is internal as well. You're putting that on yourself, knowing what is on the line, right? I mean, you've kind of been able to dip your toes into the water, so to speak, with Red Bull, and now you're doing it again with Aston.
Yeah, now with Aston, it definitely feels like almost a bit the opposite. Like it's completely in my control.
Right.
Just in terms of pressure, there's no, mm, let's say from the result side, there's no pressure there. Now and even last year when I joined was my second year of Formula Two. I knew the expectations, so it wasn't added and let's say unattainable at that time. So
Mhm.
yeah, I kind of put that pressure on myself. So in that word, there's no pressure on me, let's say. None external pressure. Um, but yeah, it's also nice in a way to be able to control my own destiny a little bit. I feel like I have a lot more freedom. With Red Bull, I wasn't able to choose my teams that I race for, at a Formula Two, Formula Three level. And so then, last year I was able to join Dams in F2, which was, completely my choice and something that I'd already wanted to do my rookie season, but wasn't able to. So luckily, was able to get with them last year and, continue on with them this year. And, it's just a nice environment for me to be in. I feel like I can work hard on my F2 stuff and then I can also work hard on the F1 stuff separate to that.
And just one last quick one. You mentioned obviously F1 came onto your radar late. Who were your kind of racing idols when you grew up? And was it IndyCar that was originally the kind of the end goal, or did you not really were you not sure what the end goal was? What was the thinking when you were a kid?
Yeah, so I went through I've said before, a bit of a identity crisis at a young age. Um, I growing up, I love NASCAR.
Yeah,
So my favorite driver was Joey Logano growing up. So I remember NASCAR was the thing every Sunday. Always watching NASCAR. And of course, I raced in karts, which was not on oval. So naturally, I was really, really good at the twisty stuff, the
yeah,
non-ovals. so then it kind of drew more towards IndyCar when I was a little bit older. And I remember one season I must have done that. I think it was that same 2018 season. I did karting over in Europe, and then I came back to the US. I raced Legends cars on ovals, and I also, started my first Formula 4 race that later that year. So I did a bit of everything. I raced it all. But it kind of went from NASCAR as a kid to IndyCar as I understood it more, and then once I finally got, a great understanding of Formula One and what it was, then, it shifted to that.
Nice. Yeah, and I suppose with that, and not meaning to be offensive at all about IndyCar, but it's nice to know that you can go back that way, later on. A lot of people have done that. I think, to be honest, speaking to you, I mean, it does sound you're probably the most versatile driver I've spoken to at this age in terms of the amount of different things you've done. So it does set you in great stead, I think, and I hope going forward. Um, yeah, that's everything, mate. So I really appreciate you taking some time, and we'll make sure we get you back on because I think so. I think I mentioned this to you when we met, but we have an American host to this show, but then we have two Brits. So I think we have a very English sounding podcast. So it's good to have it's good to have a lot of this show where American listeners can hear an American accent. But great to talk to you, mate, and hopefully we'll be hearing a lot more of your name in Formula One. So everybody listening, that was Jak Crawford. And yeah, keep an eye out on Formula 2 because his name's going to be up there as the season goes on.
Yep, thanks a lot, Nate.
Maybe Nate will decide to join us for real next week. We'll have to try to bribe him with something. But let's transition to podium predictions. How did we do in Silverstone? Glad you asked. You didn't get any points, sir.
I did not,
None.
but I seem to remember
None
actually,
points.
I wanted to go with your prediction. And then because it was your prediction, I backtracked and switched my McLaren drivers around and got 0 points. Not an excuse, but an explanation.
So I don't remember that. I think I missed a show in there. And I think I missed the one going into Silverstone.
Okay. So maybe we already had your results, your
did.
predictions, and I felt I couldn't copy you.
I think so. So you didn't score any points. Nate didn't score any points, and I scored 2. We also have a podium prediction stat brought to you by the petty firm of Briscoe, and Briscoe. Do you know Nate has gone 6 whole races without scoring a single point?
I didn't know that, but
6.
I can believe it.
I can too. By the way, the standings, I'm at 12 points, leading the way. Thank you very much. You're at 10, and Nate, because he hasn't scored a point in whatever, a lifetime, 5 points. Let's get to your predictions for Belgium, but we'll start with Nate because he's not here. He sent him in early. He's going with Lewis, 3rd, Lando, 2nd, Oscar, 1. I haven't written mine down yet, so do you want me to do that so I don't copy yours?
Go for it. I'll write mine down as well.
Okay. This is what we have to do because often we have the same picks.
Okay.
Hold on. I'm slow. Okay, go. Mine are written.
Okay,
Go.
so I go first?
Yeah, you get to go first.
Okay. So in 3rd place, I'm going to say Lando.
Ooh, okay. We are different.
That's good. In 2nd place, I'm going to say Max Verstappen, just because with all the noise around Red Bull, I can just see him actually getting a decent result out of it. And in 1st place, I'm going to try and bank a point with Oscar Piastri.
Okay, so my 3 are the exact same 3. We just have 3 and 2 in the other order. I think it's going to be another McLaren 1-2, but I've reversed them. So I've got Oscar winning it. I've got Lando in 2nd, and then I've got Max in 3rd. I wouldn't be surprised if, like you said, it is a good weekend for Mercedes. I'm just going to stick to me. I'm just going to stick to my conspiracy theory though, and let George hang around in 3rd behind Max. Or sorry, in 4th behind Max. That's my conspiracy theory.
To give Nate the credit on his as well, I don't know whether this would be his explanation, but Ferrari are apparently bringing new rear suspension that they've tested in Mugello to this track, which is meant to, or at least is intended to, solve some of the problems they've had around running the car at the correct ride height to maximize its performance. Don't rule out Ferrari either. I mean, I was tempted to put Ferrari in there, but just Max being Max, I can see him getting in the top 3, and then it's hard not to have the 2 McLarens.
Who else is bringing a big upgrade this weekend?
That's the biggest one I'm aware of.
Okay.
We get a very helpful sheet from the FIA on the Friday of every race. So I haven't had any previous knowledge of that. But yeah, knowing full well that Ferrari have really put a lot of effort into this suspension upgrade. And actually, I think it's been delayed a couple of races already. First I heard about it, Silverstone was a target. There was some suggestion that maybe it would come in even as early as Austria, but now it appears to be Spa. But they have tested it. They use one of their filming days, which are very precious commodities in Formula One, because you get a chance to run your current car, albeit on demonstration tires essentially, but or not race tires, but you get a chance to run it. So if they were able to then run at that ride height, not suffer the plank wear that saw Lewis Hamilton disqualified from the Chinese Grand Prix, that could unlock a bunch of setup options, make the drivers happier, allow them to extract more performance, get the floor in a happier place. That could all lead to better results. So there is a good reason.
Damn it, Nate.
But once there is a good reason to back Ferrari, and Nate's done it with Lewis Hamilton.
I like it. All right. Enjoy your weekend away. Are you going to Budapest?
I will be in Budapest, yeah. So I'll be watching from home for Belgium, but then straight out to Budapest.
All right. Nate, it's good talking to you, wherever you are. Thank you for watching and listening. Remember, leave us a comment, hit us up with that 5-star review, subscribe to the ESPN F1 YouTube channel. That's where you're going to find us all year long, like literally not just the season, 365 days a year. And remember, Unlapped is presented by Oracle. Right now, Oracle is offering to cut your current cloud bill in half if you move to OCI. See if your company qualifies at oracle.com/unlapped. We'll see you next week. Bye.